Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Reliability Gang podcast. And I have a very, very special guest today, the one and only Chris Hansford. How are you keeping, Chris?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And I feel honoured to be called a special guest, but yeah, I'm great, thanks.
Oh, you are a special guest, Chris. I've known Chris for, how long have we known each other now for, Chris?
Maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
7, 8 years. My early days when I was first training at Eric's, we used Hansford a lot for a lot of projects. And again, you know, even back then, the quality of the products were always great, and we've always kind of, to be honest, whenever it was sensors, it was always Hansford, really. That's kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of like the world we were involved back then.
Thanks so much. And you're not a shareholder either, are you? So that's a pretty good
I'm not,
comment.
no.
Thank you.
But I'll be honest, like back then, it was like, I would never be dreaming to be speaking to the owner of it. You know what I mean? And having a podcast, and you know what I'm saying? Like, at the time, you just kind of look at the company.
I'm an ordinary guy, remember.
But that's the beautiful thing as well.
I'm a practical guy that started from nothing and have achieved what I've achieved with a lot of hard work. So don't flower it up. At the end of the day, I'm just an ordinary guy.
But I love that as well.
Worked hard.
Yeah, and that kind of brings...
with a great team of people around me.
Of course. But that brings me to the first question. I'd love to know how it started. How did you start building this company that is now, obviously, you know, one of the global leaders?
Yeah, good one. Good one.
Yeah, so
good
you
one.
take it away, Chris. Let me know.
So basically, I'm an engineer. I've worked in the sensor industry for the whole of my working life. I'm in the ripe old age of 60. So much as someone the other day said I looked like I was 50, I thought I've got a good friend there.
That's a compliment.
But seriously, no, I've been involved in the sensor market. I've worked in various organisations in the UK, and you know that's no secret. I was involved in running Monitran for many, many years, and brought it to where it was. I wasn't the major owner, but actually, an opportunity came up. So I thought, well, if you don't go for it, try and do something on your own, then you're never going to know. So it's almost a bit like what I did as Monitran was a bit like The Apprentice. Now it's for real. So 16 years ago, we started as Hansford. We had a good core of people, and obviously I personally had a good brand value in terms of me personally. So I was able to sort of almost market myself, which is why, even though I hate it, but I have become accustomed to it, I didn't like the name Hansford Sensors because that was me, and it's not really me. I'm an engineer, I'm a down-to-earth guy. But the Hansford Sensors brand, which really is my background, with the team that I've now got and the support and the network that we've got around us, has enabled us to become very well established, incredibly well established. You know, we've got a long way to go. We're halfway through our journey, but at the moment, it's about how we continue to develop and how we enhance the brand.
Of course. What was it like? Because again, I've been in that same position as you when I first started my business. Is, you know, you get that horrible, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decision? And it's really weird because obviously now we know it was the right decision, of course. But at the time when you was making that decision, what kind of spurred you on to do it and just jump in the deep end?
I think the determination, knowing that you know the market, albeit at that stage you only knew maybe the UK, and there's a big wide world out there. So you knew that you could handle it locally, but how are you then going to develop that globally? So I guess you're always going to be a small company. If you only supply into the UK market, which accounts for like 5 or 6% of our turnover today, a very small part of the business.
That's crazy.
Then you'll always be a little colloquial local company. We needed to expand, and we needed to develop that network. And that network is really what's made us the strength we are today. With some key people developed, some Hansford employees developed with offices dotted around the world, rather than just dealing with partners. The combination of both of those has helped us massively.
That's amazing. I mean, 5% in total. I mean, how do you communicate with the world in terms of doing that? Especially probably back then where social media wasn't so ready. Well, it wasn't available, really, was it? Let's be honest. The last
100%,
10 years, like the last 5 years, it's only really come, into its own. How do you do that? How do you
get
make
on
the
a plane,
connections?
do a lot of trade shows?
Was it a lot of trade, network?
And
Wow.
just nibble away at different countries, focus on areas where you knew you needed to be successful. Left the big one alone, left the US alone, because there's a lot of competitors out there. Whereas when we were tackling Australia, we were tackling Asia, we were tackling Europe, we were competing with the competitors, but it wasn't their home camp. So from our point of view, effectively starting where we were competing with them on an even playing field rather than it being their home territory is where we've made success. But I think we're no better than the rest. What we are is we're good listeners. We can respond to people listening and just be honest, develop strong relationships like we're talking about here now, or any of my team. It's not rocket science, and it's no different selling sensors than selling anything, or getting involved in any passion that we all have in our lives. It's just making sure that you do what you say you're going to do, and if you do that, people will buy from you and they'll believe in you.
And I think that's the thing as well, as something that we've learned as well. And obviously, when we started Maintain, when I started on my own, I never really knew it was going to grow, if I'm honest. I kind of started it because I wanted to copy the model that I previously did on my own, because I was kind of a little bit, shall we say, disheartened by not being able to do what I wanted to do and help the customers.
Yep.
But I think as it's grown as well, people sell to people. And I think, actually moving forward now, and I think the reason why this podcast is quite successful is because real people are listening, and people like to hear these stories, and people like to know kind of like, how did you actually start this? For me and for the likes of yourself as well. So again, selling to people, I believe, is probably one of the major keys in terms of my short experience of running a business. Again, it's been a bit of a turbulent 2 years.
You've got all the challenges. You're right. Well, you've got all the challenges. Where'd you get your money from? How you're going to start it?
Of course, cash flow and.
And in the early days, no one knows you're there. Your phone's not going to ring because you're not there. So you've got to push yourself out there. And yes, go back 10, 15 years. Social media was definitely nothing like where it sits today. And I'm being honest with you, I'm not big into social media. I'm great at relationships.
I mean, this is new for you, isn't it?
This is very new for me. This is a scary experience for
I'm
me.
so sorry, Chris. I've just chucked him in the seat and recorded him with some
Not at
hype.
all, guys. Not at all.
I know, but this is beautiful because, again, I think I visited, was it 2 months ago, roughly?
Yep.
And I was blown away by the visit that we had. The whole team come over. Chris and his team showed me the manufacturing process, showed me the building, obviously the lovely people that work here. And I think after that experience, I come away from this with just a higher level of respect for you and the way you run your business and what you do. And, one of the major things for me was when we had that was the fact that all of the sensors were manufactured here. And all of the tests and all of the quality assurance was done in-house. And there was such a rigid and robust way of doing it. In terms of my mind, I knew the sensors were good quality because I've used them for years, and we barely get anything kind of fail or come back. That's the metric, of course. That's the number one metric. But when you actually see how they're made, then it kind of backs up that experience theory that we've kind of experienced. And for me, obviously, they're manufactured here. And just go through the process, Chris, of kind of how the manufacturing's evolved from when you first started, and kind of like the reliability side of ensuring the sensors are reliable. Because we talk about reliability all day long. Let's talk about the reliability of your sensors.
And if the product's not reliable, then the whole thing falls apart.
But that's the thing, isn't
it? There's no point in practicing what you're preaching if the product is not reliable. So from a product point of view, obviously the design evaluation, the testing, the proving is part of that journey. But it's all well and good being able to make one. It's how you make tens of thousands and how you make hundreds of thousands.
At scale,
Scale. So a level of automation is required for some of that. Key suppliers in terms of hopefully, and we've tried incredibly hard to use UK industry to help us with that journey, so that we're using as best we can UK suppliers. Unfortunately, we can't do that in every area, but we are doing our bit to support the local exchequer, as it were. So from our point of view, it's key that we've got good staff, good training, the right mindset with the people. The fact that we're involved in supplying industry that needs our product at a certain deadline, being able to respond very quickly. I mean, you gave us a challenge a few weeks ago. Could we get something done in 3 weeks' time? And yeah, there's no way we were going to let you down, because if we let you down, you let your customer down, and the whole thing would. But that
was phenomenal, though. I mean, I'll be honest, it was about 136 sensors, 36 junction boxes, and we had them in 3 weeks. And to be honest, I was like, wow. I mean, You really put yourself out. I mean, again,
We did, but if you got them in 5 weeks, you wouldn't be very happy with us, would you? So
that's the thing, and that's
so
that.
You have to deliver.
How do you deal with that though? Because this time constraint element is like we might not need anything for a while. Then all of a sudden, I'm on the phone to Chris, like, Chris, I need this, I need it. Like, it must be very difficult to be able to deal with.
And that is one of the big challenges, because that could be, you could be one of 10, 20 customers that
Exactly.
say, we've got a challenge, and actually 2 days before, 1 day before, we had no idea it exists. So trying to be accommodating is a massive hurdle for us, but that's really what our DNA is about. We've got to be able to deliver. We've got to, you can't do it every time, but you try to understand. And if you can get a bit of it done because the installation can be then phased and you've got a few more days, it's just understanding the customer. It's working with the customer to say, okay, well, we can't get those 500 sensors done this week, but how many do you need this week, and how do you need the cables, and when do the boxes need to come together, and just trying to fit that in. And then, from Will's point of view, it's easy because he's only down the road. But if that was out, the other side of the world, then you've got extra challenges with couriers and with stuff getting stuck in customs.
I mean, that must have been a big challenge for you in the last couple of years in terms of...
Yeah, but like everything, it's just part of life, isn't it?
I suppose. You have to pivot and learn, don't you, from
If
these
you're going to
things?
say, oh, we can't do it because of Brexit, or we can't do it because of something else, then you're better off hanging your coat up and saying goodbye to it.
You're right.
Because you won't... every day it's a challenge, isn't it? Whether there's any coffee in the coffee machine today or whatever it might be, it has an impact on your team, so you've got to try and support that. So I think, a few years ago I did some management training, and one of the things that came across is you've got to be seen as Mr. Positive. If I come in Mr. Negative, what's my staff going to think?
I know, yeah, exactly.
Chris has had a bad weekend. He takes it out on his team. That's not what it's about. You've got to be try to do your best to be a leader. You've got to try your best, and sometimes it is a challenge, massively.
I can imagine. Again, how do you find managing such a big process? Have you got guys that kind of look after different sections and areas?
You go back, it was a small team. There's a management team there now. There's a good structure. There's some key people that have developed skills that fit in with what we need as a business. But
that takes time, though, doesn't it?
It takes time.
People don't realise that. And again, I think
But we're only 15 years, remember, so we're relatively young.
I know, and that's the thing I think about my process. I'm only about 6-7 years, and
and having key people that you can rely on in different parts of the world that understands that local culture. I can remember when we first started, and we applied for some. We had the opportunity to apply for some grants using UK trade and industry, and then we had the opportunities for being put forward for some awards, and which we were very successful with. But I remember the guy that interviewed us said, "What have you done?" Well, it's all about understanding the people, partying with the people, and the culture in Japan is going to be different than the culture in Australia, or the culture in the UK, or the culture in Germany. And you need to work that out, because the sensor is actually the easy bit. It's working out that culture.
Yeah, and talking to the
people.
people.
Back to what you said a moment ago. It's that relationship with the customer.
As well. So, Chris, when you were, obviously, when you was growing up, in terms of, did you always know that you was going to be a business owner? And was your parents supportive of you going into engineering? And how did you get involved with it? Was it design engineering that you first got involved with, I believe?
Okay, I mean,
we're going right back.
We'll go right back. I can remember as a 10 or 11-year-old going away for the first time, going to the Lake District. In fact, before I was going away, I can remember we'd been to a local jumble cell and spent £3 on a lawnmower, and the lawnmower engine, because my dad was always very wanted to encourage me with mechanical things and engineering, and that lawnmower had seized. And this was in the days, no social media. You had to write a letter. And I remember going away, and my dad dropping me a little line saying that he'd been putting WD-40 around the pistons, and now they were released. So there's a big support that came from my father, no question about it. Would he have taken a risk? No way.
Really? So was he kind of risk averse?
He was a civil servant, so he just did what he did, but he was very methodical in the way that he did things.
Yeah.
So he had that approach, but he didn't have the business approach. And I remember when I started in business.
Where do you think you get your business acumen from? This,
my mum's brother had a very successful chain of restaurants.
Oh, okay.
So there was some business etiquette in there, but most of it, I was brought up very, very simply. Parents never had much money, So a lot of it's just being, I suppose, the discipline of knowing you've got to work hard for everything.
Okay, yeah.
And
Did that help?
Oh, massively, yeah. Because nothing's been handed to me on a plate.
I like that, though.
And that's why I've done other things to help other people in the world, in terms of whether that's opportunities with my team, my younger team that work in the different overseas offices, or other things we've done locally to help young people, which may not have had those opportunities if we haven't been able to help.
I know, and always remember as well, Chris, and I do keep putting this one out, but it's quite important that I do, is that when I started my business, I did get a call from Chris, because he actually heard I'd started, and he called me up and said, I see that you've started on your own, and it's a big, scary world, I've been there, and straight off the bat, it was like, yeah, we'll support you, and we'll offer you the discounts straight away. And it wasn't like, oh, you need to sell this much sensors to become us. It was none of that. It was a support from the very beginning, and I'll always remember that from the start, because it meant a lot. Because at the time, it was just
you were starting from ground zero. Everything was a headache, and you're just thinking, how can I approach someone if they're going to want specific contracts? They're going to want.
It was a big minefield.
You've got to, those first 6 months or first year of running any business is a real tough challenge.
It was so difficult, and that really helped, because I remember that first 6 months we did get a couple of very small sensor orders, and the profit from them really helped. Like when you're just starting out, like I remember it, like when you got one customer or one sale, it was like celebrating you won the World Cup. And I wish I got that feeling now. It's a little bit different when you start, getting these orders now. How do you manage that expectation now? Because obviously when you first started, you probably felt the same.
I can remember that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it felt amazing, doesn't it?
I can remember a paper mill, the paper industry. If I go back 30 years or whatever it might be, when I was involved with Monitor, and I can remember we'd focus on paper industry, and it was really difficult. There were some established names out there. They'd done a very, very good job. How do we sort of flip them? How do we give the opportunity? And I remember there was a paper mill in South Wales at the time, RJ Wiggins, and the guy again engaged with us and said, we've got an opportunity that's 60 sensors, but we need a sample, and it needs to be down in South Wales. This was like a Thursday. It needs to be down in South Wales to prove it on the Monday morning. And we didn't sleep. We made sure it was down there, and that was the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And you just and then that network talks. Even in those days when it was not social media, so sorry to keep harping on about that, but it was a very different way of doing things.
It was, yeah, and that intrigues me as well, because obviously Maintain has built quite a big network in terms of, on social media.
Yep.
So for us, it's always a bit like, well, do you know what? Again, when I first started the first year, there was a little bit of social media, but it was down to connections and who you know and a lot of that type of thing. But at the time, that was a lot harder than putting social media stuff out. Does that make sense? You reach less people, and it's lot. It's a bit of a grind, if I'm honest.
It's hard work. It's definitely hard work. Social media. I hate saying it. You're going to hate me for saying this.
No, say it. Be honest.
It's a bit of a. It's almost like you've got everything given to you. It's just.
Yeah.
It's all coming.
I know where you're coming from. Obviously, from experience in growing a business from the ground zero without it, and obviously us young guns coming in and be able to present some value online and reach a lot of people. You're very right. If you can use social media in the right way, you can present a lot of great ideas to a lot of people quickly.
I'm sure you can.
It's got to be done in the right way.
That's where I'm not good. I'll be the first to admit that. My old-fashioned way of picking the phone up and talking to someone might develop a stronger relationship.
I agree, yeah. But I think this is great that we're doing this, though. Because I think people get to know Chris. Because I think you're a great character. I think you're very energetic, you're very charismatic. And I don't think, obviously you've got a lot of the, your customers and connections know you personally and know that. But there's another world outside that doesn't know Chris Hansford. So this is kind of what this is about, really. It's just about saying, this is about you. This is kind of like, how do we let the world know about you as well? Because I look up to you, Chris, a lot as well. Because obviously you started a business 15 years ago. You've put a lot of hard work in. You're kind of the person I aspire to be like within kind of 10 years in terms of a business point of view, in terms of success and modelling. So for me to be able to do this with yourself is great as well. Because to be honest, we learn a lot from you as well in terms of what you've done.
No, thank you, Will. Yeah.
Again, experience-wise and stuff like that. So for me, this is...
And mistakes, because we all make mistakes.
100%. And mistakes-wise, is you learn a lot more, I think, from your mistakes.
You need mistakes.
Yeah.
It's a bit like no one likes to supply a bad product, but when you do have a problem, it's how you then respond to that problem. And and no one, I'm sorry, but no one can say we never supply a bad product.
And no one's
There's
perfect.
no one's perfect, as you
You're
say.
right.
But how do you then overcome that? And you can build such strong relationships by not being horrible here, but almost supplying bad product, because you go over the top to make sure it doesn't happen again. Give that respect, and you understand someone. You understand how they cope with a challenge, and how you can put that right.
I think there's empathy there as well, though. I think because
yeah.
Especially now we understand the process. Like since we see how your manufacturing's been done, we've gone down there. We're like, oh my god! So that 136 sensors had to go through that process within that time, and we're like, oh, okay. It's not like, oh well, Chris, done a great job there. It's more like, okay, wow, Chris really did a good job there. In terms of, so again, awareness and understanding.
Remember also that when those 136 sensors going through, there was 20, 30, 40, 50
I know,
other
to
jobs.
be honest, that was probably a small order. And that's the thing, isn't it?
But it's making sure that you get the focus in the right places.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you've got a mine that's in South Africa that needed 50 sensors at the same time, knowing that that's going to take 4 or 5 days or a bit longer to allow for some contingency on clearing customs, you've got to make sure you balance that right.
100%.
And that can be a challenge.
I can imagine that. It can be very challenging. In terms of...
and every customer is important.
Oh, God, yeah. No, so true. In terms of the lifetime warranty, Chris, that's obviously... I mean, again, we obviously know that exists. But again, I kind of feel like not many people know that's a Hansford thing.
From our point of view, it's something that we launched 4 or 5 years ago. What we do differently...
It's been around for 4 or 5 years then.
What we do differently is we don't expect the customer to send it back. So we value the customer. If the customer has a problem and they comment on it and the genuinely is a fault, we will exchange that. We don't want the goods back. We might want them back to understand what's going on. So was it the wrong product selection? Was it because someone didn't understand that the area was humid, had high levels of humidity or high levels of temperature? But the important thing is to give a quick solution back to the customer, because at the end of the day, they've got a problem. They've got a problem because of something you've either made wrong or something that's been selected. As long as you can understand that it was the original product was right, then let them have a new one, replace it, and our terms of it will be the customer needs to get that as quick as possible.
Of course.
So we don't want you to send it back. We might want to understand it later down the line, but the key thing is to make sure that machine is monitored as quickly as possible.
Of course, so that's a real lifetime guarantee, and that for us is a massive piece.
And that covers everything that we do. That covers all the product that we make for other people, all the product we brand for other people. So that statement is across everything that we supply.
Of course, and to be honest, for us, it's a rare occurrence. I don't. We've had probably...
No one's bulletproof, just remember.
No one is bulletproof, and you're going to get issues and problems, even with us, in terms of our business offering. There's going to be moments or momentary times where the ball is dropped temporarily. It's how we respond to it, which I think, for me, really kind of, emphasises the relationship and the offering that you kind of can offer.
And the openness, because you could tell me, we've got some problems with some sensors, and it could just because you want a few more sensors. It's all right. You've got to sleep with that. We'll support you on that. But I can think of examples where we had a customer in Europe a few years ago where we supplied some sensors, and the customer rang and said, "Oh, they failed." But what was the application? Oh, it's a cooling tower. Okay. So what was the IP rating on the sensor? Well, we didn't go with high IP. So really, what went wrong? Well, probably there's water gone in them. Okay. So we supplied waterproof sensors back, customer free of charge. We said, but one of the things that we want to do is make sure the partner that was involved in this has the right training.
Yeah,
because
of course.
It could have been a genuine mistake, or it could have been that someone just didn't understand it.
And to be honest, we've been in the same boat. I think when I first started in this game, when I was in my early days, I've probably spec'd an area wrong, and not realised that, and again, that comes down to product knowledge.
It does, but also there's people in certain parts of the world that will trade off price against the right solution.
Okay,
so they'll say, okay, we want the cheapest solution, but actually...
Is it good for the application?
Is it right for the application?
Yeah, that's
and
tricky.
And that's quite fundamental, again, so not just the selection, but making sure that the partners that you've got that are representing you understand the right questions to ask, because at the end of the day, they're representing me and they're representing our
Of course,
brand.
100%.
And if that fails, it could be because they haven't asked the right questions.
I know, and one thing we did, obviously, when we come up here a couple of months ago, we had Kai, our managing director, very knowledgeable guy, and big shout out to Kai. He really did do an incredible presentation with all the different products. And again, it can become a bit of a mindful kind of, Chris, about kind of what cables to use, different environments, what is best, what's not, what's compatible, what
chemicals are
what
around
chemicals
it.
around it as well in terms of chemical
what sort
sites.
of bending radiuses you need to have to install it. But again, it's a simple tick box, and it might be easy for us to say because we've been involved in it in the whole of our lives. Well, certainly from my point of view, the whole of our lives, and your younger life, as it were. You're much younger than I am, Will. But get it right first time.
Yeah.
It's a bit like installing it, isn't it? If you install it poorly, what's going to happen?
Exactly.
Bad data. Your service guys in the world will say, we've got a problem with the data. But how's it been installed? Have they generated drilled or tapped the hole or whatever it might be and gone through the right procedure, prepared the surfaces, or have they just slopped it on the machine?
Exactly, because we are responsible for that ultimately. And obviously,
it's always the sensor that you blame, isn't it?
It is always the sensor that you blame, because of course you're always going to blame the least common denominator in that scenario. And I think
it's a bit like if you go outside and you start your van up and actually the red light comes on, you say, there's plenty of oil in, I'll ignore it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, even this job that we recently had, probably one of the biggest sensor installs that we've ever done. Again, the reason why they were changing these sensors, because they had 50 millivolt per G sensors, they had TNC connectors as well on inverter driven applications, and they were glue mounted in complete wrong positions. And again, from a design point of view, when we were monitoring these things, when we come into this new customer, we were responsible for that data. So it was very difficult for us to say, when we're taking the data, we had to, almost sign this caveat to say that these sensors are not favourable in terms of us monitoring this. And it was very difficult for us to do actually initially.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of different rings we had to run around in terms of explaining why they'd had to replace all 36 AHUs with brand new sensors. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. But again, I think once we started to show them the benefits and, a bit of help from yourselves as well in terms of doing that, they could start to see why. And again, the criticality of this machinery was so important. And even, sensor position and mounting was such an important. And we drilled and tapped every single one of them sensors that you supply to us now. And now we're collecting data at this place. We're just so confident in the information. So even going from that to where we are now, it allows us to be confident that the data that we get, we can rely on. And the calls that we make are extremely big calls because this particular customer has no window of opportunity, to shut down between their tours.
Yep.
It allows us to make the right calls, And again, it all comes down to that reliability of sensor and reliability of information.
And some of that was the fact that some of those sensors were supplied a long time ago. The way that screenings are done and the way that the whole circuitry is configured is so much better today.
I can imagine. Technology had a big part to play.
So some of the electrical pickups that they got from some of the drives would have been horrendous, but a lot of that was because of what was available at the market at that time.
Do you think it was a cheaper option at the time?
No, I don't think so. I think it was the only option at the time.
Really?
It was quite a few years ago, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was a long time ago. I think they were,
they weren't screen twisted pair cables. They were just like a coaxial cable, which is why they used
literally coaxial to TNC connector. To be honest, we was quite surprised to see them because it's not something that we're used to seeing, if that makes sense.
There's some of them around, yeah.
I can imagine. But yeah, so...
At the time, it would have been the right way of doing it because there wasn't any other options. So again, it's progress.
100%.
But the customer had to understand that. What he had there had a life, didn't it? And there were some limitations with what he had, but at the time, it did the right job.
Of course.
And things have moved on.
In terms of your offering in terms of sensors and cables, Chris, again, you offer a wide variety and wide range, obviously from your experience through the industry of hearing what people require and how they adapt to it. How do you go about again, because it could be quite difficult because I think for a manufacturer, again, you don't want to offer too many different products because then it can get very difficult in terms of manufacturing.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
How do you get around, obviously, people's requirements for things that potentially wouldn't be feasible to manufacture?
So I think
You probably got some crazy ideas.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
the key thing is understanding what the application is, isn't it? So, if you've got something that's got some harsh conditions, or you've got some chemicals in it, in the environment, or something different about the environment that's going to cause a problem to the bulk standard. In the ideal world, as manufacturers, we want to supply the same to everybody.
Of course.
Because then you get the volumes up, you get the cost up.
It's a lot easier for you, isn't it, as a manufacturer?
Availability, much better. But at the same time, if you know that you're supplying something to an environment where there's something hostile about it. Now, I'm not saying the extremes of it, which could be radiation, but something hostile that's going to affect the cables, or it's going to affect the body of the sensor, or it's going to affect, electrically, it's going to affect the output. It's applying the knowledge that you have as a business and that your partners have, and that the team that we've got dotted around the world. It's taking those basic questions and saying, this is going to be a challenge if you use the basic sensor. It might cost you a bit more because we need to look at double screening if it's got an electrical output problem, or there's some high fields and some alternator fields or whatever it might be. But the customer, as long as the customer is in that journey, they'll understand that.
Of course, yeah.
If you supply them a standard product and it doesn't work, what are they going to think? They'll immediately think it's bad product. They won't think they've just done it.
It could damage your reputation as
Absolutely.
well for all the other products that you bought as well.
So applying your engineering knowledge to something and just asking about the environment, asking about the machine. Is it that the machine is running incredibly slowly, so you need to have slow speed sensors, or is it running high speed and you need to have different sensitivities? It's just going through that process, and not just me saying about it, is making sure that our partners have got it, because you've got to remember, we're a team, and that team is what has made our business, or made my business
exactly.
successful.
And that feedback as well from everyone.
Train those people, make sure they understand, but also let's not reinvent the wheel. If there is a standard product, use it.
Yeah.
If it needs different coating on the cable, if it needs different screening, if it needs different sensitivity, if it needs different frequency response, if it's got high EMC issues, then understand that and
then get a product that can kind of deal with that.
Correct.
But try to obviously be able to have that product applicable for more applications rather than just single applications as well.
And there is niche stuff, don't get me wrong. There's definitely niche stuff, but what we have to try and do is make as much as we can of standard, because then that gets the volumes up, brings the prices down, and gives you as the customer availability as quick as possible.
Exactly, and not even that. It allows us to be able to install these things in more parts of the plant as well. Because again, when it comes down to monitoring different applications nowadays, what we're finding is, in terms of health and safety, a lot of things are guided now, Chris. A lot of things you can't get into. So on the design stage, they kind
Which is great for our business. That's
perfect for your business. It's a nightmare for a condition monitoring engineer that goes around with a handheld sensor, like, oh, I can't access that piece of equipment. Oh, I can't access that. I'm restricted. And again, obviously for you guys, it's great. But then it goes down to us trying to sell them. Do you know what I mean? The fact, well, if you don't monitor that piece of equipment and it fails, and we can get to it, we need to just put a couple of sensors on as well. But with that, nowadays, again, if them sensors are overpriced, do you know what I mean? It's very difficult for justification now. So again, if we can get more of a standardized way of monitoring these pieces of equipment and get a good price for the customer, then the feasibility and the actual probability of these guys going for it massively reduces. Because again, when it comes down to it, you're always best to put a fixed sensor on something rather than be cutting holes and guards, and it can get very messy. And when you discuss that, and the great thing that we can offer our customers now is a great product at a great price that allows them to be able to access and monitor this equipment, which is fundamentally so important for them, because these are the most critical assets for them.
Absolutely. But it's not just mounting the sensor, it's making sure it's maintained. I mean, the number of times we've all gone into factories and they'll say, oh, there's got bad data, and you'll find the sensor just hanging there.
I know, it's not even connected.
Someone's done some routine maintenance, or they've had to rip the motor out because there was a problem with it, or someone's had to get access to something, and then they don't put it back again. So it's not just about supplying, it's taking ownership of it. So if that's a maintenance department, as part of that maintenance department's strategy, they need to own that sensor so that it is actually reinstalled, because it just gives you garbage, and garbage is, sometimes that garbage could look like good data. And
I know, and it could be, and again, and that can be even more dangerous, kind of, as the making a call on something.
Absolutely.
When it's okay can almost be just as worse as missing something.
Definitely, and the key thing there is it's not just So it's not just upselling, oh, you need to put a couple of sensors on there because that's what you need to monitor, but you need to take ownership of it. Because, we want you to have a reliable solution. We can give the product, but you as a site need to take ownership.
100%.
If you don't, it won't flow.
Wow, incredible. Well, Chris, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And anything you'd like to say or end the podcast with?
I think it's the first time I've ever done a podcast, so we've done a straight run at it. So great. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity, and I'm sure this will be the start of a family of a lot more.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
And I'm sure my team can give can give different approaches to it, but which will develop a great foundation of knowledge that everyone wants to hear about, and I'm sure we can give experiences to help.
Exactly, and I just want to thank everyone at Hansford for being so accommodating to us guys in terms of doing the podcast, showing us around as well. And honestly, guys, we've got we've always respected. I've always respected Chris and Hansford. We've had a relationship for a long time, but moving forward now, it's like we see so much value in terms of what they're doing in terms of British manufacturing and how the sensors are made and what goes into that. For me, just to see it, for me, was amazing. So I wish you guys could have seen what I saw, but I'm hoping I've explained it in a way that makes people aware of how incredibly well they're made in terms of British manufacturing. So thank you so much, Chris, for coming on.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Take care, guys.